Under the bright San Diego sun, surrounded by sailors in dress whites, Lieutenant Commander Sterling seized the man in the red flannel. Her eyes went wide with shock as she pulled back his sleeve, revealing a faded, old-school tattoo, an eagle clutching a trident. Elias Thorne remained resolute. He had a promise to keep. On the dais, the Admiral froze the moment he saw the ink, the mark of a ghost unit from 1972. His script hit the floor. "Unhand him, Commander," he roared, fear cracking his voice. "Stand down before you regret the rest of your life." Where are you watching this story from? Let us know in the comments. If this journey of valor touched you, consider subscribing to Silent Veterans and help us give a voice to more incredible stories of our silent veterans. The heat on Coronado Island was not the polite, humid warmth of the South. It was a dry, blinding pressure that seemed to bleach the color right out of the world. Master Chief Elias Thorne, retired, though the Navy had stopped sending him checks 3 decades ago due to a clerical death, shifted his weight on the folding metal chair. The metal burned through the thin denim of his jeans. He felt like a grease stain on a wedding dress. Around him, the world was white. Pristine, blinding white. It was the color of the dress-white uniforms worn by the graduating class of the basic underwater demolition SEAL training, and the color of the stiff, high-collared uniforms of the officers sitting in the VIP section. Elias looked down at his own chest. The red and black flannel shirt was thick, heavy, and completely inappropriate for a 70-degree day in Southern California, let alone a military graduation. But he wasn't wearing it for the style. He was wearing it because it was the only shirt he owned that hid the shrapnel scars on his back, and he'd be damned if he showed up to his grandson's big day looking like a victim. "Excuse me?" The voice was sharp, clipped, and smelled faintly of expensive lavender detergent. Elias didn't look up immediately. He was busy staring at the back of the neck of the man in front of him, a civilian contractor in a $3,000 suit who had been complaining about the Wi-Fi signal for 20 minutes. "Sir, I am speaking to you." Elias slowly turned his head. Standing in the aisle, looming over him with a clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield, was a lieutenant commander. She was young, perhaps early 30s, with a face that looked like it had been chiseled out of marble in disapproval. Her name tag read, Sterling. Her uniform was immaculate, the creases sharp enough to cut steak. She looked at Elias with a mixture of confusion and poorly veiled disgust. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Elias asked. His voice was rough, rusted from years of shouting over diesel engines and decades of silence on a fishing boat. "You are in the reserved family section," Sterling said, her eyes darting to the empty chair next to him. "This area is for immediate family members of the graduating class and distinguished guests. The general public seating is back there, behind the perimeter rope." She pointed a manicured finger toward the back of the field, where a crowd of tourists and distant cousins sweated in the sun, 500 yards away from the podium. "I'm where I'm supposed to be," Elias said, turning back to face the stage. The ceremony was starting. The brass band had begun the low, rumbling intro to Anchors Away. He needed to see Lucas. He needed to see the boy walk across that stage. "Sir, I don't think you understand." Sterling stepped closer, her shadow falling over him, blocking out the sun. It felt cold. "This is a ceremony of high tradition and honor. We have senators here. We have the Chief of Naval Operations. We cannot have—" She paused, her eyes raking over his scuffed work boots, the oil stains on his jeans, and the red flannel shirt that looked like it had survived a bear attack. Loitering. "I need to see your invitation." Elias sighed. It was a long, heavy exhale that rattled in his chest. He reached into his breast pocket, his calloused fingers fumbling for the crumpled piece of paper Lucas had mailed him. He handed it to her. Sterling took it with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. She smoothed out the wrinkles, frowning. "This is a photocopy, and it has no seat assignment number. My grandson sent it," Elias said. "He said sit in the front." "Your grandson?" Sterling repeated, her tone flat. She didn't believe him. Why would she? Elias looked like a homeless drifter who had wandered onto the base looking for a free meal. He didn't look like the grandfather of a newly minted Navy SEAL. He didn't look like he belonged in the same zip code as Glory. What is your grandson's name? Lucas. Lucas Thorne. Sterling tapped her pen against the clipboard, scrolling down a list. I have a Lucas Thorne, but his file indicates his parents are deceased and his next of kin is listed as... She stopped. She looked at the paper, then back at Elias. Sir, the guest list is full, and quite frankly, your attire is disrespectful to the uniform these men have earned. I'm going to have to ask you to relocate to the public area immediately. I ain't moving, Elias said quietly. The band struck a high note. The crowd rose to their feet as the official party marched onto the stage. Elias tried to stand, but his knees, ruined by years of jumping out of perfectly good helicopters into rice paddies, screamed in protest. He remained seated. Stand up, Sterling hissed. People were turning to look now. The wealthy wife of a donor glared at Elias over her sunglasses. A Marine colonel 2 rows back cleared his throat aggressively. The pressure was building. The weight of judgment was heavier than any rucksack Elias had ever carried. I said I ain't moving, Elias repeated, his jaw set. I watched that boy grow up. I taught him how to shoot. I taught him how to be quiet. I'm gonna watch him get his trident. You are causing a scene, Sterling snapped. The panic was setting in for her. She was the protocol officer. If this old vagrant ruined the live broadcast, it was her head on the block. She reached down and grabbed Elias's arm. Sir, come with me right now or I will signal the MPs. Her grip was strong, surprising for someone so slender. She dug her fingers into his bicep, pulling him upward. I'd let go, Elias warned, his voice low. Move, she shouted, forgetting the hush of the ceremony. In the struggle, the button on Elias's flannel cuff popped. The heavy fabric slid up his forearm, exposing the pale, scarred skin underneath. And there it was. The totem. It wasn't just a tattoo. It was a map of hell. The ink was faded, turning that distinct shade of blue-green that only comes with 50 years of sun and regret. It depicted an eagle, but not the proud, polished bird on Sterling's hat. This eagle was screaming, its feathers ragged, clutching a trident that was broken in half. Below it were 3 letters, barely legible, Mac. Sterling froze. She stared at the ink. Elias looked down at his own arm. As his thumb brushed against the raised skin of the eagle's wing, the sensory overload hit him like a physical blow. The smell of Sterling's lavender perfume evaporated, replaced instantly by the thick, copper scent of blood and the rotting sweetness of the Mekong Delta. The bright San Diego sun vanished. The pristine white uniforms turned into shadows moving in the twilight. The applause of the crowd warped, stretching and deepening until it wasn't clapping anymore. It was the thwup 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 of a Huey rotor blade cutting through the humid air. The grass beneath his boots turned to mud, thick, sucking mud that wanted to pull him down into the earth and keep him there forever. Elias wasn't in California anymore. He was back in the silence. He was back where the truth lived. Here is Chapter 2, The War Movie. Chapter 2, The War Movie. The world was no longer white. It was a suffocating, monochromatic green, broken only by the slashes of black shadow and the gray mist that clung to the water like a death shroud. The smell hit Elias first. A thick, cloying cocktail of rotting vegetation, stagnant water, and the copper tang of fear. It was the smell of the Mekong Delta in 1972, a scent that had coated the inside of his lungs for 50 years. The polite applause of the San Diego crowd was gone, replaced by the deafening drone of cicadas and the distant, rhythmic thump of artillery that felt like the heartbeat of a dying god. Elias wasn't an old man in a flannel shirt anymore. He was 25 years old, stripping the leeches off his ankles. He was Master Chief Elias Thorne, call sign Ghost Ray, and he was shivering despite the 100-degree heat. Chief, we're 2 mics out. A whisper drifted through the elephant grass. It was Miller, his point man. Miller, who would never see his 22nd birthday. Hold, Elias breathed. He didn't speak the word. He pushed it out of his diaphragm, barely vibrating his vocal cords. Sound carried over the water. Sound was death. They were deep in the IV Corps tactical zone, miles past where any American boot was supposed to be. The map said this was empty swampland. The maps were a lie. This was Charlie's backyard, and Elias and his three-man team were trespassing. Their mission wasn't to take ground. It was to recover a high-value asset. A downed pilot carrying a satchel of encryption codes that could compromise the entire naval bombardment strategy for the northern coast. The pilot's name was Ensign Vance Holloway. Elias checked his weapon, a modified Car-15 with the flash suppressor taped over to keep mud out. The metal was slick with condensation. He signaled Miller to move. They slid into the black water, the muck rising to their chests. It was like wading through molasses. Every step was a battle against the suction of the riverbed. They found Holloway 20 minutes later, tangled in the suspension lines of his parachute, hanging from a mangrove tree like a broken marionette. The young officer was conscious, but barely. His flight suit was torn, and his face was a mask of dried blood and mud. Elias cut him down. Holloway hit the mud with a wet slap and groaned. Elias clamped a hand over the kid's mouth instantly. "Quiet," Elias hissed, his face inches from the terrified ensign. "Unless you want every VC in the province to know we're here, you swallow that pain. You hear me?" Holloway's eyes were wide, white saucers in the gloom. He nodded frantically. He looked like a child. He looked like he should be at a fraternity party, not bleeding out in a swamp on the other side of the world. "Can you walk?" Elias asked. "My leg," Holloway gasped. "I think it's broken." Elias looked at the angle of the ensign's left shin. It was definitely broken. "Miller, Tex," Elias signaled to his team. "We carry him, fireman's carry, switch off every 500 yards. We have to make the LZ before sunset or we're ghost stories." The trek back was a slow-motion nightmare. The mud didn't just coat them, it tried to eat them. It weighed down their boots, sucked at their legs, and filled their pores. Elias took the first shift, hoisting the larger man onto his shoulders. Holloway was heavy, dead weight, and his jagged bone ground against Elias's spine with every step. They moved in silence. This was the discipline of the service, the ability to suffer without a sound. They were ghosts moving through the underworld. 2 hours later, the jungle went quiet. The cicadas stopped. The birds stopped. The wind died. Elias froze. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, a primal warning system honed by 3 tours of duty. "Drop him," Elias whispered. They lowered Holloway into the root system of a banyan tree. Miller and Tex fanned out, disappearing into the foliage. Elias knelt beside the ensign, thumbing the safety off his rifle. "What is it?" Holloway whimpered. "They're here," Elias said. The first shot didn't sound like a gun. It sounded like a dry branch snapping, magnified 1,000 times. The bullet took a chunk out of the banyan tree inches from Holloway's head, spraying them both with wood splinters. "Contact front!" Miller screamed. The jungle erupted. Green tracers tore through the twilight, slashing the air around them. The foliage disintegrated under the volume of fire. It wasn't a patrol, it was a company-sized element. They had walked right into a kill box. "Our suppressive fire," Elias roared, his voice changing from a whisper to a command that cut through the chaos. He rose from cover, firing short, controlled bursts into the muzzle flashes hidden in the tree line. The noise was physically painful. The rattle of AK-47s mixed with the deeper bark of their Car-15s. Mortar rounds began to walk toward their position, throwing up geysers of black mud and water. "We can't hold this," Tex yelled, jamming a fresh magazine into his weapon. "There's too many of them." Elias looked at Holloway. The kid was curled into a fetal ball, clutching his satchel of codes, sobbing. He wasn't a coward, he was just human. He hadn't been forged in this fire yet. "Get him up," Elias ordered. "We're moving to the river, the boat is the only way out." "The boat!" Miller shouted back. "The extraction point is 3 clicks east." "We won't make 3 clicks," Elias fired again, dropping a shadow that was rushing their flank. "We go to the river. Move!" They dragged Holloway through the kill zone. The air was thick with lead. Elias could feel the heat of the bullets passing him, the angry buzz of angry hornets. He didn't feel fear. He felt a cold, crystal-clear focus. This was his heritage. This was the job. You bring everyone home or you don't come home at all. They reached the riverbank, gasping for air. The water was wide and fast-moving here. In the distance, the rhythmic thwup 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 of a Navy Seawolf helicopter gunship echoed. Hope! Pop smoke! Elias yelled. Tex pulled the pin on a purple smoke grenade and hurled it onto a sandbar. The vibrant violet cloud billowed up, a stark contrast to the grim greens and browns of the war. The chopper spotted them. It banked hard, coming in low, its skid skimming the water. The door gunner opened up with the M60, laying down a wall of lead that chewed up the jungle behind them. Go, go, go! Elias shoved Holloway toward the bird. Miller and Tex scrambled aboard, pulling the injured ensign in after them. The chopper took the weight, the engine whining in protest. Elias was the last one on the sandbar. He turned to cover their retreat, firing the last of his ammunition into the tree line. The enemy was close now. He could see their faces. He could see the resolve in their eyes. He turned to run for the skid. Then the world exploded. It felt like being hit by a sledgehammer swung by a giant. The impact spun him around and slammed him face first into the sand. His right shoulder was on fire, a white-hot, searing agony that blinded him for a second. Chief! Holloway screamed from the chopper door, reaching out his hand. Elias tried to push himself up. His right arm wouldn't work. It hung uselessly at his side, blood pouring down the sleeve of his fatigues, turning the green fabric black. He looked at the chopper. It was taking heavy fire. Rounds were pinging off the fuselage. If it stayed on the ground for 10 more seconds, it would be a burning wreck. He looked at Holloway. The kid was reaching for him, tears streaming down his face, ignoring the danger. Elias looked at the enemy closing in, 50 yards, 40 yards. If he tried to climb on, the weight would delay them. The time it took to drag his dead weight aboard would kill them all. There was no decision to make. There was only duty. Elias locked eyes with the young ensign. He saw the terror, but he also saw the potential. He saw the man Holloway could become if he survived this day. Go, Elias mouthed. He didn't reach for the hand. He used his good arm to wave them off. No, wait! Holloway screamed, struggling against Tex, who was holding him back. Elias grabbed a grenade from his vest, pulled the pin with his teeth, and turned back toward the jungle. He stood his ground, a lone figure against the tide, a statue of valor carved out of mud and blood. Get out of here, Elias roared, his voice breaking over the roar of the rotor blades. The pilot didn't hesitate. He pulled collective cow, and the bird leaped into the sky. Elias watched them go. He watched Holloway's face in the door, eyes locked on him, etching this moment into his soul forever. The memory of the man who stayed behind. Elias turned to face the tree line. He squeezed the spoon of the grenade. The pain in his shoulder was gone, replaced by a strange, numb peace. He was alone, but he wasn't afraid. He was the ghost of the Delta, and he had work to do. The screen of the memory faded to black, swallowed by the smoke and the scream of the jungle, leaving only the echo of the promise he had kept. The jungle evaporated. The scream of the phantom chopper was replaced by the high-pitched feedback of a microphone dropping to the floor. Elias gasped, his lungs seizing as if he had just surfaced from deep water. The humidity of the Delta was gone, instantly replaced by the dry, salty air of San Diego. But the pain in his shoulder, the phantom fire where the AK-47 round had shattered his clavicle 50 years ago, was suddenly, excruciatingly real. It throbbed in time with his heartbeat, a brutal reminder that the past never truly stays dead. I said, "Get up." Lieutenant Commander Sterling's voice was shrill now, tinged with a panic she couldn't hide. She was hauling on his arm, her nails digging into the very scar tissue that was currently screaming at him. Elias stumbled, his work boots catching on the leg of the metal chair. He felt old. He felt heavy. The adrenaline of the memory had drained him, leaving him hollow. He didn't fight her this time. He just wanted to see Lucas one last time before they threw him out. Commander Sterling. The voice didn't come from the crowd. It came from the heavens. Or, more accurately, from the PA system speakers mounted on the scaffolding towers. It was a boom of thunder that silenced the seagulls, the wind, and the 1,000 whispering guests. Sterling froze. Her grip on Elias's flannel shirt loosened, her fingers hovering in the air. She turned slowly toward the stage, her face draining of color until she looked like a wax statue. On the dais, the podium was empty. Admiral Vance Holloway was not behind the bulletproof glass. He was moving. The 4-star Admiral, the Chief of Naval Operations, a man whose time was accounted for in 30-second intervals by a staff of 20, was descending the stairs of the stage. He wasn't walking with the measured, ceremonial gait of a dignitary. He was moving with purpose. He was moving with urgency. His security detail, 3 massive men in dark suits and earpieces, scrambled to keep up, looking confused. They hadn't swept the grass. This wasn't in the script. "Admiral, sir." A Marine colonel intercepted him at the bottom of the stairs and a look of alarm on his face. "Sir, we have a scheduled flyover in 3 minutes. We need you at the—" Holloway didn't even look at him. He sidestepped the colonel with a fluidity that belied his 70 years and kept walking. His eyes were locked on one thing, a red flannel shirt in the sea of white. The crowd parted. It wasn't a conscious choice. It was a biological reaction to power. The sea of dress whites split down the middle, creating a corridor of silence. Guests who had been sneering at the dirty old fisherman moments ago now craned their necks, desperate to see what the most powerful man in the Navy was looking at. Sterling was shaking now. She took a step back, her heels sinking into the soft turf. "Admiral, this individual was causing a disturbance," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I was just removing him to ensure the dignity of your speech." Holloway stopped. He was 5 feet away. Up close, he looked tired. The deep lines etched around his eyes spoke of sleepless nights in the Situation Room, of decisions that cost lives. But beneath the wrinkles and the weight of the gold braid on his shoulders, Elias saw him. He saw the terrified kid in the mud. He saw the eyes that had looked back at him from the open door of a Huey. The Admiral didn't look at Sterling. He didn't acknowledge her existence. He was staring at Elias's exposed forearm, at the faded, jagged eagle clutching the broken trident. "Mac Fee Sog," Holloway whispered. The microphone on his lapel was still hot. The whisper was broadcast to the entire stadium. "Task Force 157, the boat support unit." He looked up, meeting Elias's gaze. The silence in the stadium was absolute. You could hear the flags snapping in the breeze. "They told me you were KIA," Holloway said, his voice thick with emotion. "The after-action report said no survivors at the extraction point. I spent 10 years looking for a grave to visit. I never found one." Elias straightened his back. The pain in his shoulder flared, but he ignored it. He pulled his arm away from Sterling's lingering space and rolled the flannel sleeve down, covering the ink. "I didn't die, sir. Just took the long way home." "The long way home," Holloway repeated, a sad smile touching his lips. He looked at the flannel shirt, the oil-stained jeans, the weary face of the man who had given him the gift of a future. Then, he looked at Sterling. The lieutenant commander withered under his gaze. "Commander," Holloway said softly, "do you know what dignity is?" "Sir?" she squeaked. "A dignity isn't a pressed uniform," the Admiral said, his voice gaining strength, projecting to the back rows. "Dignity isn't a VIP section or a reserved parking spot. Dignity is staying behind in a kill zone with a shattered shoulder so a 22-year-old ensign can go home to his mother." He gestured to Elias. "This man isn't a disturbance, Commander. This man is the reason you have the freedom to stand there and lecture him about protocol." Sterling looked like she wanted the earth to open up and swallow her whole. She looked at Elias, really looked at him for the first time, and saw the history written in the scars she had ignored. Her arrogance crumbled, replaced by a profound, hollow shame. Holloway turned back to Elias. He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. The 4 stars on his collar caught the sunlight. "Master Chief Elias Thorne," Holloway barked. It was a command voice, the voice of an officer addressing a subordinate, but filled with a reverence that transcended rank. Elias instinctively snapped to attention. It was muscle memory. His heels clicked together, his chin lifted, his hands curled into fists at his sides. The old man in the flannel shirt vanished. The warrior stood in his place. Slowly, deliberately, the Admiral raised his right hand. He didn't give a casual wave. He executed a sharp, perfect salute. Fingers extended and joined, thumb along the hand, palm down, tip of the middle finger touching the brim of his cover. He held it. It was a breach of protocol so massive it would be taught in textbooks for decades. A 4-star admiral never salutes a retired enlisted man first. It just doesn't happen. But it was happening. For a heartbeat, Elias didn't move. He felt the sting of tears in his eyes, tears he hadn't shed since 1972. He felt the weight of the years, the silence, the lonely nights on the boat wondering if it had all been for nothing. He raised his rough, calloused hand. His fingers, thickened by nets and lines, touched his brow. He returned the salute. "Permission to come aboard, Master Chief?" Holloway asked, his voice cracking. "Permission granted, sir," Elias choked out. The Admiral dropped his salute and stepped forward, closing the gap. He didn't offer a handshake. He wrapped his arms around the fisherman in a bear hug that crushed the breath out of them both. "Thank you." Holloway wept into Elias's shoulder. "Thank you for my life. Thank you for my children. Thank you." Elias patted the Admiral's back, his hand resting on the immaculate white fabric. "You did good, Vance," he whispered. "You did good." The stadium erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was a roar. It started with the cadets on the field, the young men and women who understood what brotherhood meant. They threw their covers into the air. Then the officers in the stands stood up. Then the civilians. A wave of noise that rolled over Coronado Island, louder than the jets that suddenly roared overhead in the missing man formation. In the middle of it all, Sterling stood alone, tears streaming down her face and clapping harder than anyone else, learning the hardest lesson of her career. Elias looked past the Admiral's shoulder. On the stage, standing near the back, was a young graduate. He had a fresh trident pin on his chest and the same stubborn jawline as his grandfather. Lucas was weeping openly, staring at the jumbotron screen that showed his boring fisherman grandfather being embraced by the Chief of Naval Operations. Elias smiled. The truth was out. The silence was broken. And for the first time in 50 years, the ghost of the Delta felt the warmth of the sun. Admiral Holloway walked back to the podium, his gait heavy but steady. The energy in the stadium had shifted. 10 minutes ago, the air had been filled with the nervous yet superficial excitement of a graduation. Now, it felt like a church, a cathedral built of silence and salt air, consecrated by the revelation of a living ghost. The Admiral reached the microphone. He looked down at his prepared speech, 10 pages of generic platitudes about future challenges and global security. He looked at the papers, then at the crowd, and finally at Elias, who was slowly sinking back into his metal chair, looking like he wanted to disappear back into the woodwork. With a slow, deliberate motion, Holloway took the speech and tore it in half. The sound of the ripping paper echoed through the PA system. He tore it again and again until the carefully vetted words were nothing but confetti. He opened his hand and let the wind carry the scraps away, fluttering down onto the heads of the distinguished guests like snow. "I had prepared a speech about the definition of leadership," Holloway began, his voice rasping slightly. "I was going to tell you that leadership is about strategy, about logistics, about the chain of command." He leaned into the mic, his hands gripping the sides of the podium until his knuckles turned white. "I was wrong. Leadership is not about being in charge. Leadership is about taking care of those in your charge. It is about the sacrifice required to ensure that the person standing next to you gets to go home, even if it means you stay behind." He pointed a finger toward the VIP section, where Elias sat, head bowed, examining his calloused hands. "There is a man sitting in row 3. For 50 years, he has cleaned crab pots, he has fixed engines, he has lived a life of quiet anonymity. He has never asked for recognition. He has never asked for a discount. He has never told you who he is. Holloway scanned the faces of the graduates, the fresh-faced SEALs in their dress whites, standing tall on the field. You gentlemen are about to inherit a legacy, but do not mistake the trident pin you will receive today for the end of your journey. It is just the ticket to the show. The medal on your chest means nothing if you do not have the iron in your soul. He paused, his eyes misty. That man in the flannel shirt is the only reason I am breathing air today. He is the reason I have 3 children. He is the reason I have 5 grandchildren. He walked through hell so I could walk across a stage, and he did it in silence. The Admiral stepped back from the mic. Resume the ceremony, but there will be a change in protocol. The announcer, looking flustered, cleared his throat. Ensign Lucas Thorne, front and center. Lucas broke formation. He marched toward the stage, his movements crisp, his face a mask of disciplined emotion. But as he climbed the stairs, his eyes weren't on the Admiral. They were locked on his grandfather. Lucas had grown up hearing stories about the fishing boat. He knew his grandfather was tough. He knew the old man could tie a knot in a gale and fix a diesel engine with a wrench and a curse word, but he had never known about the blood. He had never known about the Delta. Lucas stopped in front of the Admiral. He raised his hand to salute, but Holloway shook his head. Not me, son, Holloway whispered, turning him around by the shoulder. Him. The Admiral gestured to the side of the stage. 2 MPs were escorting Elias up the stairs. The old man looked uncomfortable, hitching up his jeans, holding his faded trucker hat in his hands. He looked out of place against the polished backdrop, yet he was the most commanding presence on the stage. Elias stopped in front of his grandson. He looked at the young man, seeing the reflection of his own youth, the same fire he had felt before the jungle took its toll. "Grandpa," Lucas choked out, his voice cracking. "You look sharp, kid," Elias grunted, his eyes shining. "Real sharp." Holloway stepped forward, holding the wooden box containing Lucas's trident pin, the symbol of the Navy SEALs. He didn't hand it to Lucas. He handed the box to Elias. "I think you've earned the right, Master Chief," Holloway said softly. Elias took the box, his hands, scarred and trembling slightly from age and nerve damage, opened the mahogany lid. The gold trident gleamed in the sun. The eagle, the anchor, the pistol, the trident, the same symbols that were inked into his skin, hidden beneath the flannel. Elias reached out and pinned the badge onto his grandson's white uniform. He patted the chest, right over the heart, a transfer of valor, a passing of the watch. Lucas didn't wait for permission. He threw his arms around his grandfather, burying his face in the flannel shirt that smelled of Old Spice and engine oil. "I didn't know." Lucas sobbed quietly. "I didn't know. You weren't supposed to." Elias whispered back, holding the boy tight. "That's the job. We carry the weight so you don't have to." When they finally broke apart, the crowd was standing. The applause was a thunderous, rolling wave that seemed to shake the foundations of the stadium. As the ceremony wound down, Lieutenant Commander Sterling approached the group at the edge of the stage. Her face was streaked with mascara, her demeanor completely broken down and rebuilt. She held Elias's old, battered cooler, the one he had left under his chair. "Master Chief," she said, her voice small. I have your personal effects." Elias looked at her. He saw the shame in her eyes. He saw the realization that she had judged a book not by its cover, but by its dust jacket. He didn't scold her. He didn't gloat. That wasn't the way of the quiet professional. "Thank you, ma'am," Elias said gently, taking the cooler. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know." "Nobody knows, Lieutenant," Elias said, a kind smile touching his lips. "That's why you gotta treat everyone like they might be the one who saved the world, because one of them just might be." Admiral Holloway stepped in. "Commander Sterling." "Yes, Admiral?" She snapped to attention. "You are relieved of your VIP duties for the remainder of the day," Holloway said firmly. "Your new orders are to escort Master Chief Thorne and his family to their vehicle. You will ensure that no one, and I mean no one, disrespects this man again. Do you understand?" Aye, sir," Sterling said, and for the first time that day, she saluted with genuine respect. The walk to the parking lot was slow. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold, the colors of a bruised heart healing. Lucas walked on one side, Holloway on the other, with Elias in the middle. They reached Elias's truck, a rusted, dented 1985 Ford F-150 that had seen better decades. It sat parked between two gleaming black government SUVs. "You need a ride, Vance?" Elias asked, leaning against the tailgate. "I got a cooler full of Gatorade and some sandwiches that might be a little warm." Holloway laughed, a deep belly laugh that shed 50 years of rank. "I have a jet waiting to take me to D.C. Elias, the president wants a briefing." "Sounds boring," Elias grinned. "It is," Holloway admitted. He reached out and gripped Elias's hand one last time. "Don't disappear on me again, Ghost. That's a direct order." "I ain't going nowhere," Elias said. "I got a grandson to keep in line." Holloway climbed into his black SUV. Sterling stood by the truck door, holding it open for Elias, treating the rusted metal like it was the door to a limousine. Elias climbed into the driver's seat. He cranked the engine. It sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life with a cloud of black smoke. As he pulled out of the parking lot, he looked in the rearview mirror. He saw his grandson standing tall in his uniform. He saw the Admiral's motorcade waiting for him to leave first. He saw the ocean vast and deep and full of secrets. He rolled down the window and rested his arm on the doorframe. The wind hit his face. The ache in his shoulder was still there, a constant companion. But for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a badge of honor. The ghost of the Delta was finally home. If you were moved by Elias Thorne's story of quiet courage, please like this video, share it with someone who respects our veterans, and subscribe to Silent Veterans for more stories of the unassuming heroes who walk among us.